people trying to go viral on TikTok. It's like, if you're chasing that quick hit of virality, that's short-lived. You might go viral. People go viral every day. And if there's no substance behind it, they're going to be forgotten just as quickly.
James, I'm going to begin with a quote by Bruce Lee that I think pertains to this conversation. The creative process is a process of surrender, not control. What does that mean to you?
Absolutely. Bruce Lee was a wise man, very quotable. So I think that what Bruce means when he says that the creative process is one of surrender and not control is that there's a force in creativity that the artist or the writer or the creative harnesses. And it's a bit like tapping into a force beyond ourselves. It's almost like riding trying to ride like a bronco or something. And it's all about attuning our own consciousness to the voice of the muse. And to me, that requires a degree of surrender versus control, because you're essentially surrendering your own ego mind for the service of whatever the muse is trying to tell you. So it's not about giving up control in terms of, surrender. It's about surrendering the small ego mind in exchange for tapping into a higher consciousness and being of service to that consciousness and that idea. And for me, that's the first stage of creativity, is just opening yourself up and making yourself a vessel for creative inspiration.
Mm-hmm. So what is that muse you're talking about? What exactly is that?
So the muse is an interesting concept. That is a word that originates from ancient Greece, because the ancient Greeks had different personified gods for everything. That's just the way that they, made sense of the world. So the muse was a goddess spirit that an artist or a poet could tap into, and the muse would come down and whisper ideas into the artist's ear, basically. And for me, that's a great metaphor for how creativity works. And there are other metaphors as well. I feel like there's a lot of frameworks or stories around where creativity comes from and where the voice of the muse comes from. If you're a religious person, you might consider yourself tapping into a god or a deity of some sort. If you're more of a scientific or psychological thinker, you could agree with Carl Jung when he talked about the collective consciousness. And there's this kind of collective unconscious that we can all tap into, which is a place of archetypes. There are plenty of people that believe that they are channeling other dimensions. There are people that think that they're channeling aliens or other beings, and they're making themselves a channel from other dimensions. And for me, I believe that all of these things are all just metaphors for our own intuition. So when you talk about the creative muse, for me, that's just a metaphor for opening up the portal of intuition so you can tap into ideas and insights that are beyond the reach of the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm. My journey with the muse was when I was 19, 20, I was dating this new, beautiful, enticing woman. And suddenly I started getting inspired to work, to write, to create. And back then I had no idea what any of this was. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? Why is this new relationship, this new woman making me inspired to act? And you go to the history of rock, and it was pretty common for rock stars to have a muse with them. I started writing, okay, is it some symbol she's representing in my consciousness? And the piece I came to, which I'd love you to branch off on, is that by being with her and surrendering to her like pace of feminine energy, of just surrendering and being and laughing and enjoying life and escaping my own rigid, forceful, masculine side of things, just always be working and grinding, tapping into her creative field, just being and existing, made me tap into that.
Absolutely. Well, so there's two main aspects of the creative process, and that's the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine. because the masculine is the active doer, right? The masculine energy is what is the force that acts in the world and that initiates action with force. And it's about making and doing. Whereas the feminine is more about being and being receptive and being a vessel and, being in flow rather than force. So the masculine and the feminine, both of those energies live inside of us all. Every male has feminine energy. Every female has masculine energy. Everyone has both. And I think that artists tend to be more, men or women, either way, artists tend to be more in touch with that feminine side because creativity requires us to be receptive to the voice of the muse and to listen to the universe for ideas and inspiration that we can then take and then build and create with that inspiration. So if you don't have that feminine yin receptive side to your creativity, you can be productive and work, and you can produce a lot of things, but your work is going to not be coming from a place of deep purpose and intention, because our intuition is what aligns us with our higher calling and our purpose. So if we don't have that connection to the feminine energy, our work is going to be shallow. Whereas if we just stay in that feminine energy all day, we might be inspired. We might be, just enjoying that place of receptivity, but we might never finish our projects or get anything done because we're just, staying in that feminine flow. So for me, creativity is an equal balance of the feminine and the masculine.
What can we do if we notice ourselves being yin deficient? If you're someone who's highly masculine in the world, who just can, first off, how can we know if we are yin deficient, and what can we do to restore that energy?
Sure. Well, the first step I would say is to give yourself space to rest. If you're not used to being in that feminine flow, you might have to extract yourself from your regular productivity and just give yourself a day to do nothing. Like, it's not, that sounds easy. That sounds like a day off. But when you're used to being in that work mode all the time, it can be really hard to give yourself a chance to just rest, just dedicate a day to self-care. So that's the first thing I would say, is just actually block out times to do nothing, spending time in nature, and just, not even listening to music or a podcast or an audiobook, but really just tuning our awareness into nature, because I think that creativity is an aspect of nature. The same way that, we are part of nature. It's like, imagine that the universe is a tree that's growing. Every human is like a branch that's growing from that tree. And then the art that we create are like the leaves and the fruit that sprout from the branch. So it's a natural extension of nature and of the life force of creation. So it's just about aligning ourselves with nature and letting that flow through us. So spending time with nature, certainly. Meditation for me has always been a big part of my creative process. I meditate every morning before writing, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be just 10 minutes sitting in a comfortable position with your eyes closed, focusing your awareness on your breath, each inhale and exhale, just for 10 minutes. It's going to quiet down that busy ego mind and allow yourself to tap into that portal of intuition.
Do you ever get creative blocks, or your point in your mastery where it doesn't even happen?
Well, I show up to work every day, and that's to create. And for me, that it is a discipline. So I show up to create, and that's up to me. I can control that. What I create that day, I cannot control. So I try to give myself, like, to make a baseball analogy, I try to give myself as many at-bats as I can. Mm-hmm. So I just show up every morning and just try to tune in to what's trying to come through me. And some days I might have 5 new memes that will come out, or a full poem, or a full book chapter. And there are other days where not much comes out. Maybe I'll spend a whole morning editing 1 page in a book, or maybe nothing will come out. And that's okay. I don't try to measure myself. Some people try to have really strict word counts every day that they try to hit. I don't do that, because for me, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So I just show up, and that's what I can control. And I don't beat myself up too much if it's a day where not much, if anything, comes out.
Mm-hmm. When you say things, come through you, I've had the same experience, right? I'll be writing in flow state, and then I'll just kind of space out. I'll look back, and a quote or something will come through that I had no idea existed. Yeah. And then I go straight to, where did that come from? So how have you rationalized that? Where do those messages come from that you in that moment are like, I didn't think of this. This just happened from somewhere?
It's a great question, because the truth is, no one really knows. It's like we have this expression that, an idea popped into my head. And it's like, what does that mean? An idea popped into your head. How can an idea pop into your head? Where did it come from? And for me, it's a lot like explaining the universe by saying there was a big bang. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, what do you mean there was a big bang? Where did the big bang come from? Like, what initiated the big bang? Like, where was it before the big bang? So it's it's kind of like sweeping the real question under the rug and saying, we don't know. So I feel like we live in a universe where we are always swimming in information. And the conscious mind and our own 5 senses can only tune into so much of that information and that data. But there are subtler forms of intelligence, like intuition, that allow us to tap into this sea of information that we're swimming in at all times without realizing it. So for me, we don't access that information with our conscious mind. For me, it comes through as a feeling or as an emotion. Mm-hmm. So when I'm trying to summon the spirit of the muse, what I'm really doing is I'm trying not to think. I'm trying to feel. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to make my mind a still sanctuary where the muse feels safe to visit. So ideas for me, and I've tried to trace back the creative process to see where these ideas come from. And I've noticed that it often comes through as a feeling. So I'll just tune into my feelings, my body, my emotions. And I'm like, how am I feeling right now? And then just sit with the feeling. Don't jump into trying to have the idea quite yet. Mm-hmm. Give yourself space and have patience to let it develop. So I just sit with my feeling. I sit with my energy. I'm like, what is the universe trying to tell me? And I just try to not look for the answer with my mind, but look for the answer with my energy. And then eventually you sit there long enough and you might just get like a spark of insight. And It's like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense of something. And then you kind of start to interpret that spark of insight. And then the idea gradually becomes more and more clear. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's just about opening up that portal so we can tap into the information that's all around us at all times.
Yeah, you mentioned that a prime task for one is to create a safe space for the muse to then access that channeling or inspiration or words coming through. What makes the muse unsafe, or put differently, what blocks information from coming through?
So we as humans tend to rely on our logical, analytical mind so much. And I think that is not the same language that the universe speaks. That is a very human thing to be like, our minds and our egos are awesome. They help us navigate the world that we live in. They help us know our role in society. The ego is a very important part of our psychological design.
I love that you say that. Just side note, I love that you're saying that.
For sure. And the ego is important for creativity as well. But for me, it's more towards the end of the process. So when you're in the stage of editing, for example, the ego is great because the ego is hyper alert and it's looking for problems. So when you're editing your work, like the ego is a great ally, but it's not a great tool for listening to the voice of the muse because she's speaking a different language. So I think there's a block in finding the muse when we're overly reliant on the analytical, logical mind, because that's not the voice that she speaks. So it's just about listening and learning her language.
What's the language?
Feeling. It's the subtle language of felt sensation that we can tap into with our bodies and our emotions. And we sit with those feelings and emotions long enough, and there will eventually be a spark of insight.
Mm-hmm.
And that spark of insight is the beginning of the idea developing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sit with that long enough, and then it becomes more fully formed.
Mm-hmm. On the line of emotions, do you ever perceive art or creativity as a therapeutic outlet to deal with your emotions? Because I've often come across this idea, or I've said it on my podcast before, that often you can use, anxiety, depression, sadness, grief.
Yeah.
You can either let it to like rot in your insides internally, or you can have like kind of arrows pointing out to you and release it through artistic expression.
Art is absolutely therapeutic. And I believe that creativity is a healing modality unto itself. Because I think of it like we go through our lives and we all experience our little traumas, whether they're major or minor. And it's like if you have a negative emotion or pain in your body and you try to suppress it, eventually that suppressed pain and emotion will start to decay in your body and turn into either emotional sickness or even physical sickness. So there are all kinds of healing modalities to cleanse ourselves of those stuck emotions and pains. You can go into a sweat lodge or a sauna and sweat it out. You can go to Peru and drink ayahuasca and purge that way. But I feel like creativity is also a way of purging emotions and energy and pain from the system, because it's a way of looking within and finding what's there and then bringing it into the light of the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very therapeutic just to write down things in your notebook, just to purge that subconscious mind and get it out onto the page. It doesn't matter if it's good. I think we often equate creativity too much with this capitalistic mindset of it's a competition. I'm trying to be the best creator. I'm trying to be the best writer. And there's a place for that, if you're trying to sell books or whatever. But I think that creativity is useful in anyone's life, whether they're a professional or not. So I think it's very therapeutic just to get something out onto the page. And it's even more therapeutic to share your work in public, even with a friend or at an open mic night. I host an event called Sunflower Club, which is all about creativity as a healing modality. And it's about sharing your work in public in front of a supportive community. And whether that's a poem or a story or a dance or a joke, any mode of creativity is welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just see the transformation that people have when they maybe have never shared their creativity in public before. Mm-hmm. And you can almost just see the light in their eyes, and how therapeutic it is to get it out of their system and have it be received by supportive people. It goes a long way.
Beyond the journaling you mentioned, I'm always thinking of people who are just starting out now. Let's say someone's dealing with anxiety, intensity, or sadness, or just lost someone. Beyond the journaling, what can they do in the sense of like, if they're in a moment thinking, what art can I create, or what can I actually do to get this thing out there? What would you say to someone like that? Like, what can they start doing to figure out what their niche is and how to actually release that on paper?
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of trying all kinds of different modalities. I think that some people are more visual thinkers and drawing might be useful to them. Maybe writing poetry. Also, I think consuming art is so important. If you're not sure the kind of art that you most resonate with, I think we learn a lot from the art that we consume, and I think that's a big part of my own creative practice. And goes back to that yin energy of being receptive to and tuning in to the sea of information that's all around us, is going to art galleries, going to concerts, going to open mic nights, and just sampling all the different options that are available to us and trying them all, and sticking with the ones that work best for you.
In terms of the inspiration you mentioned, I've noticed, you also mentioned your book, and I wanted to hear you articulate this, that I'm not a visual artist. I'm more of a writer, a podcaster in that domain, but I'll watch a new director, like an A24 movie, something beautiful like that, and just watching that different artistic expression will make me inspired to create my own writing. How does that work? Why does that happen? How can that deep disparity occur?
Yeah, I mean, same with me. I love music so much. I listen to music all the time, and I cannot make any music of my own, and I never could. But that's my favorite. I write poetry, but I don't make music. But I would much rather listen to music than read poetry, because I think that creativity and anything we learn, skills are transferable. In other words, you can take inspiration from one area of your life and apply it to another area of your life. Even I've been an artist my whole life, and I've been a writer and a designer and a poet and, a spoken word artist, podcaster. And for me, it's been a journey to learn how to apply creativity to business. And it's I can look back at my career, back when I was a graphic designer, and I had been taught this creativity of graphic design, but I didn't want to do that anymore. So I'm but I understood creative thinking, and creative thinking you can learn creative thinking from one discipline, and then you can apply it somewhere else. So I learned, okay, how can I apply creative thinking to my own career or to building my own business? So the skill of creativity is transferable. Just because you're used to, maybe let's say you're a great drawer, or you love to write poetry, but you don't know what else to do with your life. Well, to be honest, it's hard to make money writing poetry, but you can look at the same process that allowed you to be good at poetry and apply that same process to something else. What was the magic that you unlocked, that you learned while you were writing? How can you apply that to business? So for me, creativity is less about the specific art you make. It's about being an independent thinker. It's kind of claiming sovereignty of your own consciousness, and not just accepting the rules that are bestowed upon us by society, but actually looking with a critical eye and trying to problem solve no matter what it is you're working on. For me, that's the essence of creativity. It's not about making art per se. It's about being a creative thinker.
I agree. I agree, but this point's coming to my mind, that at what point is it a cost to your soul to only apply your creative genius to capitalistic outlets to make money? For example, as you said, let's say you're an artist or a writer, or you're a poet, but it's not going well, and you end up creating for an agency to do something for someone else. At what point is you just channeling that creativity to something you don't love or into? At what point does that cost your soul? And how can you counteract that? Is it a matter of you get home and do your own thing? How can people in the system get the best of that?
Sure. Well, I faced that many times in my own life. I was an artist and a writer, and I ended up getting sucked into the advertising agency. First as a graphic designer, and then as a brand strategist. So I worked as a brand strategist on Madison Avenue in New York City for 10 years, which is it's I compared it to being it's like a creative fire truck, meaning you're just trying to put out fires all day. And it's an emergency kind of mindset. And it's short deadlines for everything. And it's kind of productivity on overload. And it's it's like creativity that's stuck in that loop of masculine productivity, where we didn't really have time to go into that inspiration and intuition to make sure our ideas were more rooted in a higher purpose, right? So for me, that did take a toll on me. You know, I was making a lot of money, I was being productive, but inside I was miserable. And I remember I had written poetry as a kid a lot, and I hadn't written any poetry in years. And I remember a moment where it was almost like a rock bottom in my career. Again, not from the success point of view, because I looked successful from the outside, but inside I was so miserable and I just knew I couldn't do this anymore. And I remember one morning, a poem started coming out of me. It was the first poem I had written in years. And it's funny because what allowed me to write that poem, it was similar to what Bruce Lee said in that quote that you shared. It was an act of surrender. It was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing. And I remember it was just a weekend morning, and I felt like giving up. I felt like I can't keep pushing. And that's when I surrendered. In this moment of grace, I started writing poetry again. And once I wrote one, I wrote another and another. And pretty soon the floodgates of my creativity began to open again. And then a lot of those poems that I wrote ended up being published in my second book, which was a book of poetry. So I really needed to balance that out with some of my own creative writing. And for me, I did that enough, and I started to develop my own body of work and build an audience, and that eventually allowed me to leave the advertising industry.
Mm-hmm. From where you are now as a very successful in your endeavor and what you do, looking back, how important was the come up for you? How important was the mastery process in your artistry? I think nowadays one of the issues we face is that with the new social media generation or TikTok or things like that, people are automatically expecting to go viral and immediately become something like that without actually mastering a craft or getting access to their own deeper insight into their own intuition. So how important was that process for you in developing your own mastery? And how much do you think that's essential for artists coming up? Because I think people my age are just not thinking about that. They're thinking about how can I go viral as soon as possible, matching their art to fit an algorithm to advance themselves.
Sure. Well, it was very important for me to have that long and slow come up. And I think about people trying to go viral on TikTok. It's like, if you're chasing that quick hit of virality, that's short-lived. You might go viral. You know, a lot of people go viral every day. And if there's no substance behind it, they're going to be forgotten just as quickly. You know? So I would rather direct my energy towards a sustainable, creative path where I can create things that have a longer longevity. And you can't do that by chasing trends, right? Because trends come and go, especially on TikTok. You know, what's popular this week might not be popular next week. So if you're always chasing that, you might get little spikes of popularity. But is it helping you to grow a sustainable creative life and career? Because when I think of creative mastery, there are certain stages and levels to go through. And so imagine that creative mastery is a ladder. On the bottom, you have what I call unconscious incompetence. In other words, you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know that you don't know what you're doing. This is like beginner's mind. You're just starting off fresh, and you don't really know the rules yet. You don't really know your own style. But you play around long enough and you'll reach conscious incompetence, which means you understand that you have room to improve. You might understand like, oh, I see, like I'm actually not very good, but I can get better, because you know that you're missing some tools. This is where you're learning. Next is conscious competence. So you practice enough where you actually learn how to write a certain way, or how to paint a certain way, or how to create TikToks a certain way. And this is a state of growth where you're consciously developing your skills. But at the top of the pyramid is unconscious competence. And this is flow state. This is where it just comes through automatically in flow. So it's kind of like a dancer. When you are learning a dance, you need to be very conscious of each move. You need to memorize them. It takes, a lot of diligent attention, but you practice it long enough, and then your body starts to memorize each move. And then you can do it unconsciously. It just flows through, because when you're dancing, you don't have time to think about each move in advance. You just have to go. So that's when it becomes unconscious and in flow, because you've internalized each step. For me, that's the same for any form of creativity.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. And my mind goes to now is when I would say the most proud of myself as an artist I was when I was just focused on the art. When I didn't have social media, I had no attachment to the outcome. I was just writing every day for 2 years with no attachment to the outcome. Then I shifted to social media, and I started attaching the outcome mostly. I started looking at the result of the writing, how many hits, how many likes, and my artistry gone. It was gone. I didn't have the same connection. And I actually ended up making things for an algorithm. I made things for that, because if your goal is influencer in a space, to grow, you have to match what the algorithm wants, which destroys artistry. So what do you say to that, to people in a similar headspace where like they have a core of an artist and they really want to engage that endeavor, but at the same time they're trying to match their art as an algorithm, and also they're allowing the attachment to the outcome of the art dictate the course of the art.
Sure.
What do you say to people like that, like me?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that creating art for social media is a beautiful thing. Social media is an entirely new platform for creative expression that we're still understanding. I love the fact that anyone can post something. I could have an idea right now that just popped into my head, share it on social media, and then who knows, maybe tens of thousands of people are going to see it very quickly. That is a new form of communication with an audience that has never existed before in human history. So I think it's a very powerful platform to explore, what does art look like in the age of social media? And I think memes are one example of that, where you can really create specifically for social media. It's not like you're doing a painting and then you happen to share the painting on social media. You're making art tailored for the medium of social media. So I think that in and of itself is a beautiful thing. And it's a way to engage with a community in real time and to get real-time feedback from your work. So I think that's a powerful relationship to develop. But getting caught up in the addictive nature of chasing metrics is the wrong way to go. And it's going to take a toll on your mental health. Because at the end of the day, these are algorithms that we have no control over. And we can't invest our self-esteem in an algorithm and chase after metrics. So I love to create and share on social media, but I always say focus on your message, not your metrics. Your metrics will grow in proportion to the clarity of your message. So I just try to treat my Instagram as my public art gallery, and I'm just trying to curate the best gallery that I can. And it motivates me knowing that there are followers there that are checking their own Instagram accounts. It motivates me to create and to put out a message that I think might be helpful to some people. But I try not to be too attached to the outcome or the numbers, because people forget, even if you get, let's just say like 100 people liked your picture or whatever, people forget that 100 people is a lot of people. If we had 100 people in this room with us right now, that would be overwhelming, right? So don't get too caught up in the game of comparison. And this is for life in general. It's such a buzzkill. There's a quote that's comparison is the thief of joy, Because no matter how big you are, no matter how popular you are, there's always going to be someone bigger. There's always going to be someone more popular. Yeah. So the game of comparison never ends. You never win the game. So focus on what you do, focus on your own message, focus on the people that you are called to serve with your work, and just try to deliver something beautiful or something helpful to the people that need it. And don't worry about what anyone else is doing.
What you're hinting to is deriving validation from the quality of the meaning versus, I think what I do, and many people, it's a common trauma in this capitalist system. We grow up that way. We base our self-worth off of performance, right? Daddy loves you, mommy loves you if an A. Teacher loves you, coach loves you if you score 30 points in the basketball game. That was me. And that, for me, it shifted to this stuff now. It's like, I'm worthy of affection and validation if I get 1,000 likes, if something goes viral. My ego starts chasing that as a means of validation.
Right.
But the soul's validation lies in the beauty of the messaging. So what you're saying is for people who are creating, just to, if they're proud of the messaging and they feel it's aligned with themselves, that's the metric of self-worth and validation, not the number attached to it. I'm going to give you a break to digest all this amazing information. And in this break, please comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.
Absolutely. And like, how many things get 100,000 likes that it might be a trite cliche. You know what I'm saying? So it's not even how many likes something gets is not even a good metric of whether or not it's good, because maybe just the algorithm, did that person a favor that day, or, that's a person who is hot, right? And then they shared something that's like maybe a trite kind of insight cliche, and then people are like, oh, that hot person shared that, that's cool, and they're gonna like it. But maybe they'll see that I liked it, maybe they'll like me back. You know what I'm saying? So there are so many reasons why things get engagement online, and I just wouldn't recommend putting too much weight on those metrics. Like, do you feel personally fulfilled in your creativity, in what you make? Is there a niche audience that you're speaking to that you can either inspire or help in some way with your art and your words? And I believe in tending to your own garden, meaning if whoever shows up for this message, I'm just going to nurture that audience and give them what they need, and just cultivate my own garden as opposed to trying to take over the land beyond my own garden.
Yeah. I think a quality artist has to be very willing to fail massively.
Yeah.
I've noticed that, right? I've seen, I know you saw that show, The Idol on HBO. It's like new.
I never saw it, but yeah, I know it.
For me, I respected it because I was like, this failed so damn hard. It was so excruciatingly bad. To me, that sounds insane, but I was like, I love that. I love that they took a risk this fucking big and it failed massively.
I love experimentation. I love doing things that are different. There's a new album by the rapper Lil Yachty, and it's
the rock one.
It's got an AI album cover. I think it's called like "We'll Start Here" or something like that.
I know you put out the song, sound like Pink Floyd. That was like, this is incredible.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I was listening to this and I'm like,
I had the same reaction.
I'm like, this is Lil Yachty? Because he was like a mumble rapper.
Yeah.
And then now he sounds like Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
And it was so weird. And I'm like, I was just so grateful to hear something that sounded nothing like anything on radio or what any other rapper is trying to sound like. And I've been listening to that album nonstop for a week, and there's no pop hits on it. There's no hit singles, but it's he's going on a journey and he's taking you with him. And that's my favorite art. That's my favorite music, is when people are willing to take risks and do things that might fail. But I don't believe in failure in art, because I think that failure is just a portal to discovery. The jazz musician Miles Davis said, "Do not fear mistakes. There are none." And he said that, you can't, when you're playing the trumpet, you can't play a wrong note, because it all depends on the note that you play next. In other words, if you make a mistake, if you play another note that goes in a new direction, you didn't make a mistake. You just found a new area to explore in. So for me, I don't believe in creative mistakes. I like creative experimentation. I like taking risks, and I like doing things that only I could do, or only that person could do that, because it's such a unique expression of them. And it doesn't have to be the most popular song in the world, but it's adding something original and unique to the conversation. And that always inspires me. And that makes me want to, push my work in interesting directions when I see other people doing it with their own art.
Yeah. When I view art, I think the capacity of a potential for an amazing art piece is reflective of how much you think it'll fail. In my mind. I see it that way. What I'm saying that is that if you have that vision, if you see that vision and you see this could fail so fucking big, but that means it probably has a capacity to succeed even more. What can you do to actually, put aside the failure in your mind and just say, you know what, I'm doing this, fuck it?
Well, first of all, you cannot care what other people think. And I do this in my own social media. Sometimes I'll just post something that I don't want to say I know it's bad, but I know it's not what my audience is going to respond to. But I try to put out enough variety of things just to retain my own permission to do so. Meaning, I'm not going to put myself into a box, because once you put yourself into a box, it's really hard to get out of it. So just to keep myself honest, I'll post something that's cringe or super esoteric, or something that's not the polished quote that would maybe typically get the most engagement. I just try to keep it a little bit loose. So I'm not living up to anyone's expectations other than my own. It's and I love the idea of your faith has to be greater than your fear. Self-doubt kills more dreams than failure. So if you're going to be on a creative path, don't let the fear of failure stop you. The only thing to be worried about is your own self-doubt, and to avoid that, and to have the courage to pursue your own visions, even if it's not traditional and not what other people are doing. And for me, I just take inspiration in other artists that are just doing different work that's marching to the beat of their own drummer. And I think that's the only way you can truly create something original and exciting.
This may sound morbid, but I often think of my deathbed as a motivator. And why I say that is that where my mind goes to is that even if I fail, I'd be okay with my life if I tried to the highest extent. As long as I gave it my all and tried the most I could, I can die happily. Even if I failed over and over again, if I gave it my all and truly tried, I'd die happily. I learned this as an athlete in playing basketball, in high school, that even if I lost a game, if I gave my all, it's okay. But if I was slacking on defense, my hands weren't up, I was, taking lazy shots, I wouldn't feel good.
That's all you can do. You can only control what you can do. And I try not to worry about what I cannot control. So I control where I put my energy and showing up every day to do that. I can't always control the outcome. Basketball is a team sport, and so is life. So you can't always control the outcome, but you can control the energy that you put into it, for sure.
What's the biggest creative risk you ever taken?
The biggest creative risk I've ever taken. I've always been a taker of risks in my life and my career. Meaning, I think it's important to always reinvent yourself, because life is long, and we don't live in the world anymore where you can go to college, get a degree in something, get a job in that degree, and then have a stable career for the next 40 years. That's not the way the world works anymore. That's not the way the economy works. The world is full of uncertainty these days. The economy is full of uncertainty. And I believe that creativity helps us navigate uncertainty, because the creative process is a journey into the unknown. You don't know what ideas you're going to find. You don't know how you're going to execute those ideas. So it's about being present in the moment and finding your way one step at a time and being open for new directions when they appear. So I think that creativity helps us navigate a world of increasing uncertainty. So I've changed careers like that before because it didn't feel in alignment with me anymore. When I went from being a graphic designer to being a brand strategist, a lot of people told me it was a bad idea because I had never been a brand strategist. I didn't know what that job even entailed. So people advised me against it, but I knew I needed to do it. So making a pivot like that, or moving to New York City without a plan because I knew I needed to have a bigger swimming pool to swim in. You know what I mean? Or when I was a published Hay House author, and which is like a self-help kind of publisher, and then I decided to stop doing motivational content and started making memes about the existential crisis of the universe. So taking risks can mean a lot of different things, but as long as it's aligned with your own soul, where you're like, this is something I have to do, and I'm going to feel like I'm repressing myself if I don't do this. You always have to do it. Even if you can't see where it's going to lead you yet, you owe it to yourself and to your own purpose on earth to follow through on where you feel that magnetic pull and wherever it's taking you.
Yeah, I was about to ask what makes you so able to change things on a dime, but you answered it there in the sense that you're so in tune with your emotions and your spirit that you can sense that you can sense somatically the cost of not following what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
You can feel the universe's repentance or anger at you towards not shifting. And the opposite point is that most people in America, the standard American way of being is you get a job. Let's say you're an accountant. No hate to accountants. You go to college, you're an accountant. You're an accountant. You say you wait till you retire. That's your life. And most people just pick a job, they stay in it, and then they just retire. So for them, would you argue that the way for them to find themselves is to just pay somatic attention to whether they really feel in their body, mind, and spirit as to if this is the highest alignment,
Yeah, and some people can be accountants and be happy with that. So It's not like if you have a more stable, boring career that you need to get out of it, because you can be creative in your own home life. You can raise kids in a way that is inspirational, right? You can host dinner parties that bring together community in a creative way. There's all kinds of ways to be creative. So I wouldn't advise anyone just to quit their jobs unless they really feel that they have to.
Okay.
And I've always been, my favorite artists are the ones that have changed on a dime. This is I got this little lightning bolt tattoo, and that's a David Bowie reference. He has an album cover where he's got a lightning bolt over his face, and David Bowie is a great example of how if you're a musician and you stick to one sound and you just try to replicate that sound again and again and again, that's like chasing the viral TikTok moment where it's like, oh, that worked before, so I'm going to engineer this algorithm to hit again. And I'm just going to duplicate the formula that worked last time. And you might get a couple extra hits that you can squeeze out by doing that. But before you know it, there's going to be diminishing returns and you're going to be irrelevant. So I learned from people like David Bowie, who would master a whole sound. Like he created an album called Ziggy Stardust in 72, I think. And he was this alien rock star, and he had a whole persona and costume, and it was this concept album. And people loved it, and he got world famous on it. But after that album and after that tour, he retired the character and never performed as Ziggy Stardust again. He invented a new character, and every few years he would invent a whole new sound, and his audience would maybe change. Maybe some people wouldn't follow him to the next stage of his career, but then he'd find new fans, and some of them would grow with him because the audience is changing too. The audience is growing too. So they like to see change reflected in the art that they're consuming. So I always learned how important it was, both for longevity, but also just for your own inner satisfaction, to love what you're doing and to be excited about what you're doing. I like the idea of beginner's mind. Beginner's mind is essentially, it's a concept from Zen Buddhism. And in the mind of an expert, there are very few possibilities because they think they know how everything works. So they're just going to stick to that same formula. But in the mind of the beginner, there are many possibilities because they're not weighed down by old ways of doing things. So I like the idea of trying to live with a beginner's mind and to always stay fresh and inspired and to find new territory to play in so you can renew your own inspiration instead of, thinking you have everything figured out and just turning the wheels.
So another topic I wanted to hit in the topic of artists is the capacity for artists to inflict social change. And you had an example in your book of you argued that artists are basically the canaries in coal mines of society. So why do you think that is, and how does that work?
So I think that the way change happens in society is gradual. And before you can build something new, like a new supply chain, for example, you need to have a plan. And before you can have a plan, you need to have a dream. So I think that imagination is the first step of all change and transformation. And I think that the role of artists, and again, I use the term artist loosely, it's like the role of creative thinking, the role of imagination, what that could be in business or in science. Einstein was a dreamer. People don't know this. Einstein was not good at math, and all the equations based on his formulas, Einstein didn't even do those equations. He had the concept, he had the idea, he had the dream and the vision, and then other people helped prove them true with the math and the equations. So people don't even know Einstein was a dreamer and very much like a right brain thinker. So I think that all social change begins in the imagination, and it's the artist's role to be those image setters, to plant the seeds in the collective consciousness that can be actualized. So I think that I love thinking about memes, right? And because what a meme is, we think of memes as being like a piece of content on social media. But the true meaning of the word meme is a viral idea. So any idea that takes root in the collective consciousness and spreads, that's the definition of what a meme is. So I'm a big believer in the role of artists and of visionaries and of dreamers is to plant memes into the force field of the universe and see what takes root and spreads. And there are examples like, in the Renaissance, in the late 1400s in Italy, this was coming out of the Dark Ages. And it was the artists and the philosophers and the thinkers who looked back to ancient Greece to find principles that they could bring to life in their own era. And that sparked a renaissance of culture and science and mathematics throughout Europe. And it was the artists and the dreamers who planted those seeds in the culture.
What's the process like if let's say you feel a certain way about a cultural issue, whether it be, gender stuff, race stuff, or political things? How can someone with that passion, that burning passion to create change, what can they do to figure out, okay, what art can I create from this that will help shift the messaging in the populace? Because I think so many of us nowadays, especially youth and all of us, we live in the most heightened emotional era, I think, in one of the most heightened in human history. And each of us have these incredibly divisive opinions on any issue. What can we do to channel that into art to create the change we want to see?
So I have an exercise that I call plant a vision. And what I would recommend avoiding is fighting against what you don't want. Okay?
What do you mean?
It's about planting a vision for the world you want to see, not fighting against the world you don't want to see.
Okay.
So like Buckminster Fuller, this visionary architect, had a great quote like that where it was like, you don't change the world basically by destroying the old world. You create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. So I believe there's so much conflict on social media and how people engage with each other. And the whole world seems to be playing this game of argumentative absolutes. Mm-hmm. It's like, I believe this and I believe this, and we're just going to be on this, engage in conflict because we're united only by our shared outrage and confusion. But I would rather use my words and use my art to plant seeds for the world I want to see. So what I try to do is, what does that look like? What is the world that you want to see? Just imagine it. Let that vision live in your own head. Just picture it. Just sit there, and the listeners to this podcast, give yourself a few minutes just to truly imagine the world that you want to see. It has to exist in the mind and in the imagination before it can exist in reality. So let it exist in your own mind. Picture it. What does it look like? How do people relate to each other? How does the ideal economy work? What is a fair and balanced society that's connected to nature with an integrated masculine and feminine, at peace with each other and connected to our own hearts? Let that vision live in your mind, sit with it, and then express it. Write a story about what this world looks like. Write a poem about this world. Create some social media content about it. And you're just planting seeds, right? It's not your job as an artist and as a creator to make this world come true. This requires all of us. Again, it's about controlling what you can control, and you can control where you direct your own consciousness. So I believe in being a living embodiment of the world you want to see. Be the meme that you want to go viral in the world. Be the glitch that you want to see in the matrix. Mm-hmm.
What is the world you want to see, and how is your art reflecting that?
So I believe that humanity has been cut off from our own nature and our own spirit. And I believe that we are living in a society that Terence McKenna called it the Ego Dominator Society, which is kind of a top-down hierarchy. And there are a lot of theories that the origin of this Ego Dominator Society was around 10,000 years ago with the invention of agriculture, where humans went from being hunter-gatherers to being farmers. And this was a big change in human history. And on the surface, it's a pretty good change, right? When you're farming, it's a lot more, you can scale it. You can feed more people that way. But for the first time in human history, people could own land and they could hoard resources. And there started to be a disconnection between the haves and the have-nots. And you fast forward that 10,000 years, and you have what we see today, which is the vast majority of the world's wealth in the hands of a few. So Terence McKenna, one of my favorite philosophers, he believed that in order to solve the problem of the ego-dominator society, we had to look back throughout history to prior to the invention of agriculture to learn the principles and the wisdom that we have forgotten, which is essentially our own ancestral knowledge and ways of living. So I believe the world that I want to see, because I also I think there's a lot of value in much of the progress we've made as a society, from a technological perspective. So I believe in integrating our technological society with some of the ancient principles that we have forgotten, such as living in close communities and having a strong connection with nature and worshiping the goddess on the same level as the god, right? Integrating the masculine and the feminine, and applying that concept of community and interdependence back in our lives. So I call this the new Renaissance, which is it's an integration of the ancient past and the technological future, and fusing them together in a way that can open new doors for us to step into for a more sustainable future. So I believe in using technology, whether that's social media, and infusing it with wisdom, with higher consciousness, and just planting seeds to restore that balance to the world.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing to hear you say that. That's the intention behind my name, the New Age Sage. Just that exact combination, right? Because it's
New Age and the
it's like we live in these polarities, right? Because I come from why I'm more spiritual and into ancient healing and stuff like that. Is the Western almost killed me. Right? I was put on all these psychiatric medications, no good, bad news. And I became biased and distasteful towards the medical system and the new medicine ways of being. So I went super strict into shamanism, all that kind of stuff. And I realized that extreme was its own thing, right? All the psychedelics have their own issue, in my opinion. So now I was like, the key is in this duality, right? We're here for a reason, that we can combine this new rapid age technology with ancient ways to create this new way of being. On that point, how can we actually use social media or use these technologies to be more holistic in a way, if that makes sense? Like, what behaviors on social media are we doing that we shouldn't be doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, how can we behave with social media in a way to not let it have the negative side take over us?
So I don't think it has anything to do with social media, because I think that social media is just a reflection of our own consciousness. Okay. Social media can be our best friend and it can be our worst enemy. It's like fire. You can use fire to cook a meal. You can use fire to burn a house down. And if you're showing up to social media from a place of inner turmoil and just reactionary thinking, that's going to play out in how you use the platform. You're going to lash out at people. You're going to get engaged in all kinds of back and forth in the comments. You're going to post things that are complaining about the state of the world, maybe, or about the political party that you hate the most. And you're just going to use it to amplify your own discontent, right? Social media can do that. But if you are a regular meditator, you have a healthy diet, you get exercise, you have love in your life, even if that means one person or your family or a few close friends, and you are dedicated to nurturing your own consciousness and nurturing your own life and giving yourself the care that you need, and you are showing up every day to be a living example of the world that you want to see, and you engage people and speak with intention and purpose, you can apply that to social media too. And then you can be a force of good. It's like, what is the message that you want amplified in the world? And if you're not sharing that on social media, then you're using it wrong, because then you're sharing things that are unconscious. You're just blindly reacting as opposed to acting with intention. So I think that it starts with within and how we show up in the world, and then bringing that version of ourselves to social media. And if we all do that, it's going to be a much more peaceful place.
Well, within what you're saying is this, I often think that my core life mission is to be authentic. That's what I kind of believe, that we have it twisted in society that, we think that that the goal, the North Star should be fame, money, a beautiful wife or husband, the Lamborghini. But to me, it's learned to become that the more you become authentic, that road will bring you those things if you want. And then presenting that version to social media. In your experience, because I'm just feeling your energy and being with you, I sense is pure authenticity. I'm assuming that's been hard work getting there. How has that affected your success and your ability to be a successful artist? The more you become your authentic self, like how has that aided your success?
Well, that's everything, because if it's not authentic, you're just going to be imitating, and if you're imitating, it's going to be shallow, right? Because you can be yourself better than you can be anyone else. So you can imitate, there are a lot of songwriters that imitated Bob Dylan. None of them were Bob Dylan, right? To be a great songwriter, you need to not imitate the best person doing it. You need to look within yourself to see, well, what do I have to add to this conversation? And you need to develop your own skill. And authenticity is part of it, but you also need to be dedicated to your craft. Because if you can be authentic, but if you never really learn how to speak right, or write in a way that's compelling, or, host a podcast in a way that is interesting, you're authentic, yes, but is it landing with people? So I think authenticity is very important. And I think dedication to your craft is equally important. I think those are the two biggest cheat codes. Being authentic, being true to who you are, not faking it, but also having the dedication and the commitment to keep showing up, keep developing your craft, so you can get into that state of unconscious competence where you're in flow state. So your authenticity can best shine through.
Yeah, I feel like the dedication to the craft creates the authenticity. Why I'm saying that is that, when you first start doing something, whether you're a writer, podcasting, artist, actor, that you're filled with so much doubt, so much fear. And that's the blockage towards you becoming your highest self, right? So like the diving into an artistic endeavor expression, through that process, you learn to peel away the fear and the doubt. And the more you can peel apart those voices, then that heroic version of you comes out, that authentic self. So it's exactly what you're saying, right? Like I couldn't have found myself if I didn't completely test my doubt, my fear, and overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dedicating to going on that inner journey. That's gonna, and I think in life you have to find your own way. Like I really think that I have this poem that's called "I Was Born a Long Way from Home," and the whole idea is that we're all born far from where we are meant to be, from where our soul wants to be. And life is that sacred journey of finding our way back home. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we're all born lost and confused into a family we didn't choose. And there's no roadmap that comes with life. So it's about looking within to find the way, and to dedicating yourself to that journey, which is the hero's journey. Every life, we have to face the unknown, and we're gonna face dragons and demons, and we're gonna have to go through the darkness, all of us, to come out on the other side as a more forged in the fire of that journey.
Yeah.
To come back home as a more fully realized version of ourselves.
Yeah. I want to end the conversation with this quote and unpack it a little bit, because it reflects exactly what we're saying. This is by Robert Hughes. "The greater the artist, the greater the doubt. Perfect confidence is granted to the less talented as a consolation prize." And what I'm saying that is exactly what we're saying, right? Like, if I didn't have all the doubt, all the insecurity, I wouldn't have had the journey. I wouldn't have had the hero's journey. I wouldn't have been able to find the qualities in myself I need to see to become me.
Yeah.
So how is that true? That quote ring to you?
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of, you said you're a basketball player. I played basketball in high school as well. It reminds me of Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan was, he really was the most confident player because he was that talented. But he was always looking for people who doubted him. In other words, he was always looking for that element of doubt to motivate him. So he would read the paper or listen to the other team talking, and it's almost like he was like looking for any disrespect or any doubt in him, and he would take that doubt and he would internalize it, and he would use it as fuel to get better. So he was always improving. He was always motivated to compete, no matter how many championships he won. He was always motivated by his own doubt or the doubt of other people, and he let that fuel him. So I love that idea. I think the shadow aspects of life, the darkness and light, it's all contrast, and the darkness and the doubt and the shadow are what propel us to find the light, and we wouldn't be motivated to do that if not for the doubt and for the shadow. So I think it's a beautiful thing when you can transmute that into fuel to keep going.
Yeah, it's one of the things I try and teach, that the darker the shadow, the brighter the light end of the tunnel, in the sense of like, for all my deepest shit, my most fucked up things I've done, the qualities in me I've hated, the more I've dug and dug and dug, I've found the diamond, right? Like, for example, like Michael Jordan, I'm not Michael Jordan, but in the sense that what used to destroy me now fuels me in a way. So it's just like, it creates I think one thing you said earlier was like, you were saying the ego is amazing, it's beautiful, and I think it's true if tamed, but what I learned is that my ego creates this discipline. Like my ego, I use it for discipline, right? Like if I didn't have a big ego, I wouldn't be able to show up every morning to do what I do.
Absolutely.
Is that the same for you in some ways?
Yeah, the ego is just your identity. You want to love your ego. You can have an underdeveloped ego, or you can have an overdeveloped ego. You really want to have that sweet spot, because if you have an underdeveloped ego, you are going to be frozen by indecision, and you're not going to have enough self-worth, and you're going to always be reactive to what other people are doing because you can't stand in your own power. So the ego is that identity that allows us to have self-worth and to stand in our own power and to be confident in who we are. That's very important. But if your ego is overdeveloped, then you're putting too much importance on who you are. And, it's kind of like the journey through life is to get a strong enough ego and then let it go. So, because you don't want to
unpack that a bit. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah. Well, I always think of, people are always talking about identity, and I love this, what someone like Ram Dass, how he would talk about himself in life. And he would say that his goal was to become nobody, to have no identity. And that is the opposite of being so attached to your own identity. But it also needs to come from a place of inner security. So you can't become nobody in the Ram Dass sense, where you're like dissolve the ego and you have, you have a certain sovereignty over your own life, and you can surrender to the unknown and let it go and be comfortable with just the flow of life. You can't really do that unless you have developed that ego to the point of having that inner security and that worth and that identity. Mm-hmm. So it's a necessary stage of development. And I think when you're a child, you're developing that ego. And, as you are finding yourself, when you're 18, 19, 20, going to college, you're finding yourself, you're learning about yourself, you're developing that ego. But the ego can be a trap. You don't want to get too attached to it and too caught up in that ego mind.
Yeah.
So you do want to find it, but then you want to be able to let it go, and then eventually become no one.
You have to build yourself up to have the courage to let go. In the sense that, why I'm saying that is that the ego can create in you this strength to tell yourself, I can handle this, right? I got this, I can do this. Like, I can handle what life throws at me. That requires an initiation journey to have that level of identity.
Yeah.
But once you get there, you can be like, I can actually handle this. I can deal with the unknown and atrocities of life. Therefore, I'm gonna let go.
Someone said that the first half of life is learning to be an adult, and the second half of life is learning to be a child. And it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's like developing that identity, that sense of self, and then letting it go, and then returning to that playful nature of a child.
Yeah, because you can get judged for being playful and feeling like a kid, right? Like in this weird adult capitalist world, that men only get validation for being stern and serious. So it takes courage and enough self-belief to be playful and to be yourself. But I just wanted to thank you so much for all the wisdom and experience you drew up in here. Especially, I think this is a especially important conversation because of the way I see artists, like an earlier part of the conversation, I see artists only focusing on the outcome of their art due to, algorithms and not having that built up self-worth or level of mastery artistry. I think it's very pertinent for me, especially. So for me, thank you. Do you have anything to shout out? Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, my Instagram is Words Are Vibrations, and that's where I post most of my stuff. And then if you go to the link in my bio, I have a new book that's going to be out in February called The Art of You, the Essential Guidebook for Reclaiming Your Creativity. And that's available for pre-order now. So you can just search for The Art of You or go to my Instagram bio and go to the link. And there's a bunch of free goodies for people who pre-order the book. So pre-order now and you'll get access to all this content, extra of video courses, and even a launch event. So pre-order now, and hopefully I'll see you down the road.
Amazing. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, please click this video right here and don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.